We all have that one watch that we always look at, but we never buy. It's the watch that we think is cool, it's great, but for some reason we never end up buying it. For years, the Big Crown Pointed 8 has been that watch for me. Oris just released the Big Crown Calibre 473. Has my opinion on the Big Crown Pointed 8 changed? Before we get into the watch itself, let's have a look at the competition. Depending on how you look at the Big Crown Pointed 8, you can either look at it as a sports dress casual watch when it's on a steel bracelet, or as a dress watch with a distinct retro tool vibe look about it. The blue Big Crown Pointed 8 on steel bracelet is clearly in the former category. This is a watch that will speak to individuals that want an alternative to the Novus Club Sport, the Bell & Ross BRX5, the Tissot PRX, or an Oyster Perpetual, depending of course on how much you intend to spend. Buying a version on a leather strap with the Oris signature distressed JPM style straps, you're in the category of watches much more like the Hamilton Murph, the Bremont Broadsword, and the IWC Pilot Mark 20. The comparisons with the competitors shows how this watch is a bit of a chameleon in terms of aesthetic. Small changes in strap or choice of material or dial very clearly change the use case of this watch. I mean, no matter what you do with the Submariner, it's always going to be that luxurious sport success watch. Not so with the Oris Big Crown Pointed 8. The reason for this is a couple of elements. Although the Big Crown Pointer models share the same overall design language of a large dial, Arabic numerals at all hours positions, date chapter ring, and date pointer, small changes in the line make huge changes in the aesthetic. Comparing the Voltenberg to the 403, the change in font for the hour markers puts one watch firmly in the engineering vibe, where the other falls into the dressy watch territory. Some look modern, where others come across as vintage. Comparing the Servo Volante with the 473, the sword hands instead of the cathedral hands also modernizes the watch significantly. The versions with the fluted bezel versus the smooth bezel contribute to this chameleon-like, almost schizophrenic personality. To some, this is a good thing, to others, not so much. There's no doubt that one of the reasons I've always held off on buying the watch is because of how the design choices limit the versatility of these watches. Which brings me more specifically to the 473. This version has the smooth polished bezel, the sword hands, the arrow pointed 8, the small seconds on a pastel blue dial with a distressed leather brown strap. Overall, a very good looking package, albeit with a few design choices that also frustrate me. Let's start with the negatives. The pillbox crown, which is a signature feature of this watch, has always come off as off to me. I'm not asking for an IWC Big Pilot style crown, but perhaps a pillow shape or other rounded form would fit better in my opinion. The pastel blue is great if you like it, but why they didn't just go for a black or faded gradated black-gray dial in the initial release, I don't know. I appreciate how Oris goes their own way, but making it black or dark navy blue would make it so much more versatile. I love the sword hands, but I miss the crescent moon pointer on the Big Crown models. Again, this is a personal preference, but it comes down to the fact that I always find it easier to spot which date is being pointed at when the crescent partially envelops the date in question. It's a niggle, but at this price I get to complain. Finally, I find the choice of a fully brushed case and flanks and a highly polished bezel as a weird choice. What I do like though are the sword hands. The fact that you still get the best date complication in the world simply because you don't have a date window, but rather get a balanced and integrated date display system on the chapter ring. And I love it in 38mm. That's the thing I love about the Hamilton Murph the most, and it's a big part of my attraction to this model as well. The choice of distressed brown leather also works really well, and overall the watch sends a signal of architect or designer or other creative type. All this might sound like I find more dislikes than likes with this watch, and still I started by saying that I might end up buying this model, or considering it at least. And there's a reason for this. It's the movement. Depending on which Big Crown model you buy in the current lineup, you can choose between 3 movements. You can get a modified Solita movement, you can get an in-house automatic movement, and in the 473 you get an in-house manual movement. This manual movement is, for the price, really impressive. I've spoken previously about the Pro Pilot X and its impressive movement. Here also, which is rare for me, find myself wanting to buy a watch purely because of the work that Oris has put into their manually wound movement. It's got a 10-year warranty, plus minus 3 to 5 seconds per day, anti-magnetic, and a 5-day power reserve. The finishing for the price is really well done, especially with the small detail of having the power reserve visible on the rear of the case through the display case back. This movement isn't just a meaningful upgrade, but also something that speaks to the enthusiasm linked to being interested in watches. Sometimes it's the watch and sometimes it's the movement in itself. It's not quite a Speedmaster 321 or an A61 or an El Primero, but I do think it's significant and something that elevates this watch. So the question is, will I buy it now? As I said in the beginning of the video, this is one of those watches that I've always liked but never bought. The movement is a big plus for me. I love the design aesthetic of this watch overall, but I also dislike it because of its very specific aesthetic, and I'm certain that others will feel the same way. This is a watch that requires some clear contemplation as opposed to a Tangente or a Pelagos 39 that are as broadly appealing as possible. I respect Oris for not just making something easily palatable for everybody, but the way they combine the individual elements make these watches very characteristic and therefore will appeal to very niche buyers. So personally, I want this movement with the sword hands, with the crescent pointer, the fluted bezel, the gradated black dial version, because I'm not an architect or a designer or some other person whose wardrobe any day of the week would fit this watch. At this price, I personally lean towards demanding more versatility of my watch. Weirdly, I'm more willing to spend a ton of money on a less versatile watch, where the relatively speaking more affordable ones need to be more broadly versatile. Otherwise, they just don't get wrist time. Oris make cool watches. I can't really recommend the Oris Big Crown Pointed 8 or the 473 to the public in general. What I can say though is that the specific model with the very specific configuration of dial, hands, case, bezel and movement will be perfect for the very specific individual to whom that specific combination resonates. What do you think? What combination of dial, bezel, pointer, case, strap would you choose in the Big Crown Pointed 8? Let me know below. Like, subscribe. Cheers.